Something has shifted within you lately. Maybe it was an experience everyone around you could see, or perhaps it was a silent battle that unfolded entirely beneath the surface, one that only you truly understand. Whatever it was, it left a mark. You are no longer standing where you once stood. Right now, you find yourself in a unique space between your past and your future. Part of you is looking back at who you've been, while another part is being drawn toward who you're meant to become. The emotions that come with this transition can be confusing. Is it uncertainty? Is it anticipation? More often than not, it's both. Welcome to a deeper understanding of mindfulness. Today we're exploring a truth that ancient Buddhist wisdom recognized long before modern psychology began to explain it. Meaningful transformation rarely arrives without warning. Before life shifts in a significant way, subtle signals begin to appear. There are signs that something greater is unfolding beneath the surface, signs that you're being guided toward a more authentic version of yourself. This isn't simply a philosophical discussion. Think of it as a reflection. As we move through these insights, you may discover that what you're seeing has been quietly revealing itself to you for far longer than you realized. 1. You feel an unexplained inner restlessness there. There is a certain kind of discomfort that doesn't come with an obvious cause. From the outside, your life may appear stable. You've achieved goals, established routines, built relationships, and fulfilled responsibilities. On paper, everything seems to be in place. Yet deep within, something feels unsettled. It's not loud or dramatic. It's subtle, a persistent sensation that something is calling for your attention. Like a gentle current moving beneath still water, it keeps reminding you that something inside is shifting. Most people instinctively try to escape this feeling. They fill every quiet moment with distractions. They stay busy. They scroll endlessly. They convince themselves they're simply exhausted or overwhelmed. Why? Because sitting with an emotion that has no clear explanation can be deeply uncomfortable. You can't fix it with a checklist. You can't solve it with a quick answer. It simply remains, asking to be acknowledged. In Buddhist teachings, this stage can be understood as awareness awakening before understanding arrives. It's the moment when a deeper part of your being begins recognizing that your current life has taught you everything it was meant to teach. That doesn't mean your path has been wrong. It means you've outgrown it. Imagine water contained within a vessel that has become too small. The water doesn't announce its need for expansion. It naturally presses against its boundaries. That is what this feeling often represents. It may resemble anxiety, but it isn't necessarily anxiety. It may feel like dissatisfaction, but it isn't a lack of gratitude. Instead, it is often the earliest indication that a new chapter is trying to emerge. The real sign isn't the restlessness itself. The sign is that your old solutions no longer work. Activities that once brought comfort fail to provide relief. Achievements that once felt meaningful no longer create the same fulfillment. Familiar sources of happiness seem strangely empty. What you're noticing is the distance between who you've been and who you're becoming. And within that space, life begins speaking in a new language. Many people misunderstand this phase. They view it as a problem when it is actually an invitation. Ancient wisdom reminds us that before a lotus flower rises toward the sunlight, it must first loosen itself from the mud below. That process is neither comfortable nor predictable. The same is true for personal growth. That subtle stirring, that feeling you can't fully explain, may simply be the beginning of your next evolution. You don't need all the answers today. You don't need a detailed roadmap. For now, it is enough to stop seeing this restlessness as evidence that something is wrong and start recognizing it as proof that something new is beginning to awaken. 2. The things that once defined you begin to fade away. This sign often arrives quietly. In fact, at first it may feel more like loss than liberation. You wake up one day and realize a belief you've carried for years no longer resonates with you. A role you've always played, the caretaker, the achiever, the one who never struggles, the one everyone depends on, suddenly feels uncomfortable. Relationships that once seemed essential begin to drain your energy. Dreams you've spent years pursuing lose their emotional pull. Goals that once inspired you now feel connected to a previous version of yourself. What makes this experience especially unsettling is that it often happens without conscious effort. You didn't intentionally reject these things. You didn't make a formal decision to let them go. They simply began drifting away on their own. Like autumn leaves releasing themselves from a tree, they fall naturally when their season has ended. Buddhist philosophy teaches that suffering often arises from attachment, not because the people, beliefs, or experiences we cherish are wrong, but because everything in life is constantly changing. Nothing remains exactly as it is forever. When a deeper stage of growth is approaching, life frequently begins by loosening your attachment to what you've outgrown. This can feel like an identity crisis. As familiar pieces of yourself disappear, an uncomfortable question emerges: who am I without these things? The mind desperately searches for certainty. It wants something stable to grasp. Instead, it encounters openness, unknown territory, a space that feels unfamiliar and uncertain. But here's what wisdom traditions have taught for centuries. That space is not a void. It is possibility. The structures that are falling away are not collapsing to leave you empty. The old version of your life is giving way because the next stage of your journey requires a larger foundation. What lies ahead cannot be contained within the identity, beliefs, or circumstances that once defined you. Many ancient Buddhist communities embraced a powerful practice centered on this understanding. When a chapter came to an end, a relationship, a responsibility, or a significant season of life, they resisted the urge to immediately replace what was lost. Instead, they allowed themselves to fully experience the ending. They sat with it. They honored it. They gave it space to complete its purpose before stepping into something new. Why? Because acknowledging an ending with awareness creates room for a meaningful beginning. If you're noticing parts of yourself beginning to fade, your instinct may be to resist the process. You may feel compelled to hold tighter, to preserve the familiar, to cling to the identity you've always known. That reaction is completely natural. Yet the deeper invitation is not to fight the transformation, it is to trust it. Allow what no longer belongs to your future to gently release its hold. Not because you've given up, but because you're making room for something more aligned with your growth. Life doesn't remove things simply to create absence. It creates space for what is meant to arrive next. And often, what comes afterward reflects your authentic self far more clearly than what came before. 3. The same lesson keeps returning in different disguises. Have you ever found yourself wondering why certain experiences seem to repeat throughout your life? Perhaps a relationship ends, only for the next one to trigger many of the same emotions. Maybe a difficult situation at work finally resolves, but before long, a remarkably similar challenge appears somewhere else. You think you've left a particular struggle behind. Then suddenly, it returns. The details may be different, the people may change, the setting may look completely new, yet something feels strangely familiar. The emotional reaction is the same. The tension feels the same. The disappointment feels the same. And deep down, you recognize that you've stood in this place before. It's easy to label this as bad luck or unfortunate coincidence. But from the perspective of Buddhist wisdom, repeated patterns often serve a much deeper purpose. Many spiritual traditions share a common understanding. Life continues presenting the same lesson until it has truly been learned. Not until we avoid it. Not until we outrun it. Not until circumstances magically disappear. The lesson remains until something within us transforms. Growth happens when we stop responding from old pain and begin responding from newfound understanding. It happens when experience turns into wisdom. It happens when a challenge no longer controls us because we've changed our relationship with it. When people notice recurring patterns, they often focus exclusively on what is happening around them. They analyze the circumstances, they study the people involved, they blame timing, luck, or external factors. And certainly, there are always outside elements to examine. But life has an extraordinary way of presenting the same message through different forms. The names change, the faces change, the locations change. The details shift just enough to convince us we're facing something entirely new. Yet beneath the surface, the lesson remains the same. The true message is never hidden within the circumstances themselves. It's hidden within what those circumstances are revealing about you. Maybe it's a boundary you've repeatedly ignored, despite knowing it should exist. Maybe it's a familiar type of relationship you continue choosing because it feels comfortable, even when it isn't healthy. Maybe fear keeps steering your decisions before wisdom has the opportunity to speak. Or perhaps you've been carrying an old belief about yourself, a belief that says you're inadequate, too much, not enough, or somehow undeserving of the things your heart genuinely needs. Whatever the lesson may be, recurring patterns tend to point directly toward it. And once you become willing to see it clearly, the accuracy of that guidance can feel astonishing. Life does not create repetition without purpose. Each cycle brings you back to the same opportunity for growth. The scenery changes, but the invitation remains. The same doorway appears again and again, patiently waiting for a different response. This is where ancient wisdom offers something profoundly valuable. Many modern approaches encourage people to force their way out of patterns through determination alone. They focus on fixing, controlling, or overpowering the issue. But deeper teachings suggest another path. The goal is not to fight the pattern. The goal is to become aware of it, to observe it honestly, to sit with it long enough to understand what it has been trying to teach you all along. Because if we're honest, most of us already sense the truth, beneath the excuses, beneath the explanations, beneath the convincing stories about why this situation is completely different from the last one. A part of us already knows, and the moment that awareness becomes clear, something begins to shift, not overnight, not flawlessly, but gradually. You start recognizing the lesson earlier. You notice the familiar path before you've walked too far down it. You feel the pull of old habits and old reactions, yet something within you pauses. And in that pause, a new choice becomes possible. Sometimes that new choice feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it requires disappointing others. Sometimes it asks you to leave behind a version of yourself that once felt safe. But growth often begins the moment you stop choosing familiarity over truth. This sign invites you to ask a different question. Instead of asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" ask, "What is this experience trying to teach me?" Because life is remarkably patient. It does not rush your growth. It does not punish your mistakes. It simply continues offering opportunities to learn until the lesson finally becomes part of who you are. Some truths cannot be understood through explanation alone. They must be lived, felt, and experienced before they can fully transform us. And when that transformation finally takes place, the pattern often disappears without effort. Not because you forced it away, but because it no longer serves a purpose in your journey. The lesson has been absorbed. The awareness has taken root. What once felt like an endless cycle becomes a powerful reminder of how far you've come. Looking back, you begin to realize that every repeated challenge was quietly guiding you toward a deeper understanding of yourself. What once appeared to be an obstacle was actually a teacher, returning again and again until you were ready to receive its wisdom. So if a familiar situation is showing up in your life right now, resist the urge to see it as evidence that you're stuck. Instead, view it as an opportunity to respond from a higher level of awareness than before. Growth is rarely measured by whether challenges disappear. It is measured by who you become when they arrive. Every recurring lesson carries within it the possibility of freedom. The moment you choose understanding over reaction, courage over fear, and wisdom over habit, you begin stepping beyond the cycle. And on the other side of that choice is a version of yourself that is stronger, clearer, and more aligned with the life you're meant to live. The lesson returns again and again, first as a gentle whisper, then as a stronger nudge, until eventually we become willing to listen. Repetition is not proof that you're falling behind. It's evidence that life is shaping you for a higher level of understanding. Each recurring experience is preparing you to become someone wiser, stronger, and more aware than before. What keeps resurfacing is not there to punish you. It is there to help you master something your soul is ready to learn. 4. Solitude begins to feel essential rather than lonely. There are seasons in life when something unexpected happens. Even the company of people you care deeply about can start to feel overwhelming. Familiar conversations, social gatherings, and constant interaction no longer provide the same comfort they once did. This doesn't mean you've stopped caring about others, nor does it mean you've become distant or disconnected. Instead, it often signals that a profound inner process is taking place, one that requires quiet in order to unfold. You begin seeking moments of solitude almost instinctively. A walk without distractions feels more nourishing than entertainment. The early hours of the morning become precious because the world has not yet filled itself with demands and noise. You find yourself appreciating silence in ways you never expected. Rather than feeling empty, it begins to feel restorative. For the first time in a long while, you can hear your own thoughts clearly and connect with emotions that are often drowned out by the expectations of everyday life. Many people misunderstand this phase. In a world that constantly celebrates activity, choosing stillness can appear unusual. Others may worry about your withdrawal or assume something is wrong. They may interpret your need for space as sadness, distance, or rejection. As a result, you may feel pressure to return to the familiar noise, even when every part of you is asking for peace. Yet spiritual traditions have long recognized a truth that modern life often overlooks. Genuine transformation requires room to breathe. Lasting change cannot fully develop while you're constantly occupied by responsibilities, distractions, and the opinions of others. The deepest shifts happen internally, away from the spotlight, in moments of reflection and stillness. Consider how nature operates. Before a butterfly emerges, a remarkable transformation takes place in complete seclusion. The process is hidden from view, protected from interruption, and impossible to rush. The stillness is not an obstacle to growth, it is the very environment that allows growth to occur. The same principle applies to your own evolution. When life is preparing you for a significant new chapter, it often directs your attention inward. It encourages you to step away from the endless stream of external influences and reconnect with your own inner voice. In that quiet space, you begin hearing truths that have been waiting patiently beneath the surface. You start recognizing what genuinely matters to you rather than what others expect to matter. Something even more meaningful happens during this period of solitude. You begin discovering a deeper version of yourself. Not the identity shaped by social expectations. Not the version that constantly adapts to make others comfortable. But the authentic self that exists beneath all the roles you've learned to play. This inner self is often calmer, clearer, and far more aligned with your true values. It has been present all along, patiently waiting for enough silence to make itself known. It doesn't force its way forward. It simply waits for you to become still enough to hear it. If you find yourself longing for quiet, craving time alone, or feeling drawn away from distractions that once consumed your attention, don't rush to judge it. You don't need to defend your need for space. You don't need everyone's approval to honor what your spirit requires. Allow yourself the gift of stillness. Trust that the silence serves a purpose. Just as a seed requires darkness and time before it can break through the soil, your next stage of growth may be unfolding beneath the surface in ways you cannot yet see. Your solitude is not evidence that life is shrinking. It is evidence that something new is taking shape. 5. You carry a deep certainty that change is near of all the signs. This one can be the most difficult to explain. There are no obvious facts to support it. No clear evidence. No logical argument. And yet, you know. Not with your mind, but with something deeper. A quiet certainty begins living within you. It exists beneath your thoughts, beneath your fears, beneath the endless analysis that usually fills your days. It's not based on predictions or wishful thinking. It's a feeling that something significant is approaching, even if you cannot yet see its form. There is a quiet awareness within you that recognizes something important is changing. It understands that a chapter of your life is reaching its natural conclusion. It senses that a new one is preparing to begin. Even if you cannot explain it logically, there is a steady feeling that you are standing at a crossroads between what has been and what is about to unfold. Most people who experience this feeling cannot clearly describe what comes next. They don't necessarily have a detailed vision, a carefully mapped out strategy, or absolute certainty about the future. Instead, they carry a subtle inner recognition that they are approaching a significant turning point. It's similar to the atmosphere before a storm arrives, not the storm itself, but the unmistakable shift in the air that tells you something is on the way long before it becomes visible. In Buddhist wisdom, there is an understanding of a deeper form of knowing that exists beyond ordinary thought. It emerges from a level of awareness untouched by constant mental analysis. Unlike logic, it cannot always be explained, measured, or defended. The mind often struggles with it because it doesn't fit neatly into categories or formulas. Yet despite its mystery, it possesses a remarkable clarity. What makes this inner knowing so powerful is its quiet nature. It doesn't arrive with drama or demand attention. It isn't fueled by fantasy or wishful thinking, nor is it an escape from present challenges. Instead, it appears as a calm certainty resting beneath the noise of everyday thoughts. When it carries that sense of stillness, it becomes one of the most reliable forms of guidance available to us. The difficulty is that many people immediately allow fear to overpower this awareness. They sense that change is approaching, yet rather than moving toward it, they retreat into what feels familiar. This isn't because they lack faith in themselves. It's because every meaningful transformation asks us to leave behind something known before we can fully embrace what is unknown. Growth rarely provides guarantees in advance. It asks us to take a step before the entire path becomes visible. It asks us to trust before every question has been answered. And that can feel deeply uncomfortable. This is where the practice of non-attachment becomes more than an idea, it becomes a way of living. Every transition requires releasing our grip on an old identity, an old story, or an old version of life. Letting go is not weakness. It is an act of courage. It is the willingness to move forward even when certainty is unavailable. Choosing growth often means choosing trust over control. It means choosing possibility over predictability. It means believing that life can support you even when the next step remains unclear. If you are experiencing that feeling right now, that deep, unmistakable sense that your life is preparing to change, there is something important to remember. You are not standing on the edge of something being taken from you. You are standing on the edge of becoming more than you have been before. The discomfort you're feeling is not necessarily a signal to retreat. More often, it is evidence that you are expanding beyond old limitations. It is the sensation of new possibilities making room for themselves within your life. You do not need every answer today. You do not need to see the entire journey. You only need the willingness to cooperate with the process. The willingness to release what has completed its purpose. The willingness to welcome what is trying to enter, and the willingness to trust that the same force that guides nature through endless cycles of growth is also guiding your own evolution. The intelligence that turns tiny seeds into towering forests, transforms cold winters into vibrant springs, and creates new beginnings from every ending is operating within your life as well. Nothing about your growth is accidental. The challenges, shifts, and awakenings you've experienced are not designed to destroy you. They are helping shape you into someone your present self has not yet fully discovered. And perhaps the strongest evidence of that transformation is this: something within you recognized these words. Something inside you felt a connection. Something quietly responded. That response is not random. It is another sign that change is already unfolding. Real transformation rarely arrives with loud announcements. More often, it appears through subtle restlessness, unexpected endings, recurring lessons, periods of solitude, and an inner certainty that cannot be explained by logic alone. If any of these experiences resonated with you, pay attention to that feeling. Trust it. A deeper part of you already understands what is being asked. You do not need to force the future into existence. You do not need to chase what is meant for you. Your task is simply to stop resisting the process that is already underway. Because the next chapter begins the moment you become willing to step toward it. If this message connected with something meaningful within you, share it with someone who may also be standing at a moment of transformation. Sometimes a single insight arrives at exactly the right time, reminding us that we are not lost, we are simply becoming. Remember, every meaningful transformation begins before the results become visible. What feels uncertain today may one day become the very moment you look back on with gratitude. Trust the process unfolding within you. Trust the lessons, the quiet pauses, the unexpected endings, and the new beginnings taking shape beyond your sight. You are not falling apart, you are growing into a life that is more aligned, more authentic, and more expansive than the one you've known before. Keep moving forward with faith, one step at a time. The path ahead may not be fully revealed, but your willingness to walk it is already enough.